morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to GW Institute for Korean Studies, or GWIKS. I'm Joon Hyung Kim, Associate Director of GWIKS. Thank you for joining our Korea Policy Forum. Today's forum is co-sponsored by the East Asia National Resource Center at GW. As you know, South Koreans will elect their next president in early March next year. The two leading candidates are former Gyeonggi Province Governor Jae-myung from the ruling Democratic Party and former Prosecutor General Yoon Seok-youl from the opposition People Power Party. The GW Institute for Korean Studies has invited a prominent supporter of each major candidate to share their views on the race and their preferred candidates' foreign policy goals. Last week, we discussed those of Yoon Seok-youl, and today's session will focus on Jae-myung's foreign policy platform. Today, we are privileged to host a distinguished speaker, Professor Joon Hyung Kim, a GW alum. Welcome back home. He is the former Chancellor of the Korea National Diplomatic Academy and currently a professor of the International Studies Department at Handong Global University. And he's also serving on the Special Committee for Diplomacy and Security for Jae-myung's campaign. And also joining us today as discussants are two distinguished Korea experts, Alexis Dudden, Professor of History at the University of Connecticut and a fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center, and Mark Tokola, Vice President of the Korea Economic Institute of America. With that, let me turn it over to Joon Hyung.
Okay, thank you very much for your generous introductions, and nice to see you all. And yeah, I'm having actually a really busy day. I have like a 4 or 5 schedule. This is the last one, and I hurried back from the last schedule in Plaza. Actually, I had another webinar actually there. I'm tired, but I'm happy to and I'm willing to answer any question from you. And as I was introduced, 6 months ago, I was, Chancellor in KMBA under MOFA, and I, came back to school and I taught 1 semester. It was hard, actually, yes, but I was happy to be back. And right now, actually, I finished my semester, so I'm freer now, and I can more focus on helping, advising government party candidate to Jae-myung. And I may give you, what's going on in our camp. Korea is cynically called professors who are really, hanging around this politics, call it professor. Actually, I don't want to be called professor because I'm not really interested in become a politician, but I want to contribute in my country with my knowledge and expertise. So I think it's 2 different things. Sometimes some people it's blurred, but for me at least it's clear. And so that's why I helped President Moon 5 years ago, and actually I'm proud of actually creating the term New Southern Policy and New Northern Policy. And actually, I'm proud of that, even though, after I created name, but somebody was working on it. But and another one, what I explain is at this time, because government party, actually 5 years ago, it's not many, foreign policy experts really, flocked together in the camp, maximum 50, 60. But there were ex-generals, ex-diplomats, but they were not really conspicuous. But now, much more active and many more people. So 3 competing groups at this time. And one group is actually represented by or led by former Unification Minister Lee Jong-seok. He's labeled as pro Nomuhyun, and his team backed by ex-Prime Minister Lee Hae-chan under Nomuhyun government. and they had experience, used to be in the NSA, National Security Advice. The other group is recent group, it's a rising group, I think, ex-diplomats, Wisam Nak, as an ex-minister in embassy in Washington, Korean embassy in Washington, and he was a former ambassador to Russia. And he actually was being helped by many government party National Assemblymen who once really stabilized or tried to persuade the candidate to become more pro-America. And they framed me, or they kind of criticized me too, even anti-American, which I don't agree. Okay, and actually, kind of a power struggle is going on, but in a good way, I think it's still competing. And my group, actually, I'm leading group of 50, around 50 people, from civil group, from ex-general, from not many diplomat, but some people. So our group is considered most comparatively left. But if I have a chance or a question later, I will explain it. So I think our group is more, yes, comparatively try to be more autonomous, but pragmatic at the same time. Okay, one thing actually I want to remind you of is, in Korea, just like in America, politics, this DSU, diplomacy, security, unification, is not a big, game changer in the elections, especially for progressives, liberal candidates. Don't want these issues become a center of attention. So they wanna go low-key in these issues. So it's very ironic that this issue actually area is most competitive area of advising him, but somehow that's the reality. And at this moment, even though I'm not a campaign master, but as you know, it's neck and neck. Many people predicted it's a really close election, maybe under 2% or 1%. Right now, many even in our campus, predict if we have election today, we're gonna lose. But we have a 3 months to fight for, and then many people said 3 months in Korean politics is permanent, almost permanent, and I agree. Okay. And then, okay. And do I know Lee Jae-myung very well? Actually, frankly speaking, I don't know him 100%. Yeah. And what's the position or what's the communication now? Actually, I think, and so in the past, he said that, okay. Actually, okay, then I don't think I have to say that because this kind of, yeah. Okay. Actually, I exchange text message almost every day with him, usually unilateral. I, commented on recent issues and some plans, or I commented on what he said on the public, to the public, and on media interview, things like that. And time to time, almost every time he answered me back, but with a short word, thank you, or I got it, all those things. Okay, and I'll try to give him balanced message or advice. So please think it that way. Half of the what I'm going to say is maybe my idea, or I plan to advise, or I already advised. but another, 50% is, I guess, I think he agrees. So it's not really, I cannot say that I know him 100%. And as Professor Kim Yeon-ho told, I like that actually, a supporter, not the, already decided advisor. I'll stop here.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I have to say, about him too. Yeah, right. He's really a man of pragmatism, and he tried to be. His campaign slogan is "Getting it done," and I think I already shared with you, some of you, in the other occasions, arrangement. And I introduced the episode, and when he became a mayor of Sangnam, and he asked his staff to collect 200 small, campaign promise or policy, then he can do it within 1 year without changing law. So that tells you a lot of things about him. And after he became the governor of Gyeonggi, the same order, but 500, plan that he wants to get it done. So maybe he's going to ask 2,000 or 3,000 if he wins the elections. And here and there, his comment is kind of sometimes contradicting, sometimes dangerous, especially relation with Japan, or sometimes he's not really consistent. But I think he tried to be pragmatic. Okay, I'll stop here.
Thank you, Joon Hyung. I think you gave us a very strong impression that you know much about Jae-myung's foreign policy platform. So let me ask Mark to make his comments and ask questions for you. Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, hearing about the different schools of thought or taxonomy of advisors is very helpful. That's perspective we don't have here so much in Washington. So it's very interesting to hear how that's done, and to hear about Jae-myung personally, what he's like, is a wonderful thing. So thank you for that. The role of a discussant is supposed to be to discuss or make comments, but all I have is an endless list of questions, I'm afraid. There are so many things we could talk about that I fall back on questions. So Professor Kim, I do not expect you to answer all these questions. I'm just asking them as a way of kind of outlining an agenda for future conversations, or to highlight things that interest us. So I'll talk about 6 of those. First, the Moon-Biden joint statement from May 21st. I think observers were struck by how long and detailed and future-oriented that joint statement was. It's been described as a blueprint for the relationship going forward. But that's already from May, and now we're in December. So has anything changed? Would a new Korean administration next year see a need to add anything to or take anything away from the joint statement? Second, on North Korea, is it actually better for the US and South Korea to closely align their policies toward North Korea? Or might there be some benefit to taking different approaches, thinking that one of them might work as long as they're coordinated? And if we plan for success and assume talks can restart, what should the agenda be beyond denuclearization? There are things we probably need to talk about with North Korea other than denuclearization or sanctions. Cyber attacks, conventional weapons balances, human rights, economic reform. So what should that agenda look like? And finally, on North Korea, is it getting too late to talk about unification as a potential end state? Is that now kind of off the table? Third, as the author of North and Southern and New Northern, New Southern policies, I've got a question about third country relations for South Korea. So the Biden administration has placed heavy emphasis on regional and multilateral groupings, not necessarily treaties, but flexible groupings of countries to deal with issues. So apart from the United States and China, what countries or groups is it most important for South Korea to focus on? Japan, India, ASEAN, CPTPP, the EU. So who else does South Korea need to deal with in next administration? Fourth, the overlapping of economics and security policy. The US is used to dealing with economics and security as if they were 2 completely different things, but it's now changing with supply chain issues and resiliency and protection of digital networks, among other things, those are becoming national security issues. So in Washington, we're looking at a new relationship between the government and American companies on how to deal with those economic commercial issues. So does the South Korean government have that same relationship with the corporations, the chaebol? I mean, the US government might think the corporations here, American companies, will follow their lead on security issues. They may not. The government may not have the ability to control companies. So might we have a four-way dialogue between the US and South Korean governments and US and South Korean companies? Fifth, and just briefly on climate change, it's a big issue. We're all confronting it. So what should be the area of emphasis for South Korea to deal with climate change? Now, we've seen that South Korea, along with Japan, Saudi Arabia, and those three countries, are betting on hydrogen as a future energy source. But under a progressive administration, might South Korea consider returning to civilian nuclear power as a way to reduce emissions? And my last point was on demographics. It's kind of always there, but I was very struck at the end of last week that the Statistics Korea organization announced that it appears that this year, for the first time ever, the South Korean population will actually decline. That's a remarkable demographic watershed. So is it a political issue in South Korea? And should there be government policies to deal with that? So like I said, please don't answer all of those. I'm just outlining them as things we're thinking about.
You have a really long list of challenges that Korea is facing. So Joon Hyung, if you want, you can be picky.
You know what? Thank you very much for, food for my advising to him. I think you touched really important issues. Okay, I tried, but I need a whole day to answer that, and some subject I have to study and then answer it. Okay, about the joint statement at the end of May, I think is everybody here, both progressive and conservative, all consider this is like big watershed, and it's a turning point in terms of US-ROK relationship. As you said, it's in the longest, statement historically, and then touched so many areas. But you know what? Bak government and Jae-myung government actually they declared strategic alliance with the U.S. But at the time, there's no contents or meat in it. There's a slogan at the time, but now, really, I think, and many people agree that this is really upgrading the alliance. But a little bit different sentiment here. Progressive said, actually, let me explain the conservative perspective on that. They say finally Korea decided to choose America over China. So this is the turning point that we have to rely on, or have a deeper relationship with the U.S. and even the issue, because they pointed out, for the first time, Korea agreed or declared stability in the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. All that, I think is a persuasive argument. And on the other side, the progressive that's really worried, because at least the Moon government's position is like this. I don't think it's pure balance between these two countries. I don't agree with that. And our relations, of course, is underpinned by the alliance, but we tried to handle them not damaging China with relation with China, because after that issues, we tried to decouple this and try to change this too much dependence on China and try to diversify our trade channel, especially toward Vietnam. But this year, in a way, we kind of went back to the original, almost 30% dependence on it. So it's not easy. It's not going to be, going to do it in overnight or in a few years. But we all felt feeling that we need to reduce or somehow decouple. But many people, and I agree, and divide it into two areas. The high-tech issues, we need more cooperation with the US. But, other manufacturing goods or trade, these maybe, not the high technology area, then we still need market of China. So that's the policy. But I think it's depending on the next who wins the elections, and I think it's if conservative opposition party, then this joint statements can be the real booster for them and to more inclined to US. But I'm not sure that even conservative party will join Quad or Five Eyes or other regional groupings. You said this as a third questions, and because how even conservative government can ignore importance of China. I think China asking after this thought, they regret. Some Chinese, many Chinese experts said it was a kind of mistake, sanction after that deployment. They thought they pushed too much. So right now their position is, maintaining neutrality, or at least staying outside of this regional grouping is so thankful for them. So maybe, Moon government position is like this. We can cooperate, working together with this Quad or Five Eyes, or even, with Japan on specific issues as much as possible, but not, as a member, because being a member means to automatically kind of have a same kind of anti-China coalition, be afraid of it. Okay, unification issue, actually, it was a big issue a few days ago. And actually, he said it, I think today or yesterday, unification is almost unrealistic. He says so. And then this all progressive are so shocked and criticizing. How can you say that? But he, in a way, maybe his words and expression is too strong, but is his context of what he's saying is like this. It's a peace first, and then unification later policy. Actually, it was succeeded, from Kim Dae-jung and Moon Jae-in. It's peaceful coexistence first, and then after nobody is really bothered by and harmed by unification, then that's the moment that we can talk about. So here in even among progressive, unification is not really desperate or a goal, especially in near future. But saying that out loud is not really welcoming by progressive here. And who is the next important? Of course, in any case, I think it's United States still is most important country. And next one is, I think many people say then plan B is China. No, I don't think so. I really don't think so. Yeah, plan A is US, but plan B is not China. Plan B is, as I said, actually that was one reason why I coined the New Southern policy. ASEAN actually is important. And actually I'm talking about, and actually I'm advising him that Europe, EU can be a good plan B. Plan B means it's not really separate plan. Actually, it's complementing plan to because it's strategic competition between the US and China. So maybe we can have a coalition, our own bespoke strategy that I see. with the, France or Germany, ASEAN or Canada, these countries having a hard time. We all agree that we pointing out and we criticize Chinese behavior, violation of liberal, international order, but we don't want actually, driven into, like a new Cold War type of competition. So in that sense, we don't want to choose one side over the other. So maybe, we had a lesson from that, and Australia lesson from sanction from China. So maybe we can have a coalition. So on the one hand, we can kind of buffer as a collectively, pressure from this strategic competition. On the other hand, we can have a political leadership, collective leadership can help, developing countries or pandemic or, climate change. So maybe I call it, we can have a third zone for groupings. And this issue population, is a really big problem, and everybody's talking about, but not really a good solution for that. Only thing, there's, politicians and, mayors and governors, only what they think is just giving compensation money for those who people have more babies. So it's a really serious problem. I think it's just like climate change. The pace is slowly, but it's kind of accelerating. It's already starting. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joon Hyung. Alexis?
Thank you, Professor Kim, very much for your thoughtful remarks. What I'm going to try to do is pose 3 questions that if you want to roll into one answer to get to audience questions as well, that would be fine. I find, as Mark did, very interesting your observation that Pali professor is now a pejorative, especially in Korean history. But I find equally interesting that conservatives in the US especially use the term scholar practitioner with quite a lot of emphasis. It's a positive term. So maybe you can emphasize that your knowledge is a positive in this, especially since the candidate himself is not known for his foreign policy work over time. So I think it's great. And it's actually really interesting to know that you are behind the new Southern and new Northern policies, which I think is truly one of the more interesting features of Moon's presidency. So I'm going to try to roll these 3 questions together. You introduced yourself as having been labeled anti-American, which it doesn't actually have valence in reality in some ways. At the same time, obviously, it carries a lot of weight inside South Korean politics and South Korean society writ large. So if you could maybe comment on, does that mean having a more autonomous security platform vis-a-vis the United States? You noted that the term pragmatic is the view that with which you are trying to guide your preferred candidate. You are supporting this Lee Jae-myung, so your preferred candidate. And how might, if you envision a more pragmatic, autonomous security strategy, which in some circles in South Korea defines you as anti-American, how, given that younger South Koreans are noticed by many observers as crucial to the March election. For the first time, many people are saying it's the 20s and 30s that are really going to carry that. And from what I understand, especially given recent experience teaching at Yonsei University several years ago, I felt old, realizing how much had shifted between my generation and the students vis-a-vis North Korean policy. And that's where, if you want engagement, does that also define you as anti-American? Does it define you as anti-South Korean, which of course is impossible for you, but these terms carry a lot of weight when you're trying to win an election or convey an idea, which, it is pretty astonishing to declare as a candidate that unification is unrealistic. How then can that be, how then can you tie that in to achieving an end of war declaration, which I personally think is an excellent first step. So maybe expand on that a little bit. What does an end of war declaration mean that does not define you as anti-Korean or anti-American, if that's possible? And then to circle just a final question that I would throw in the mix, because I find very interesting your response to Mark's question about third country relations. And you didn't even touch on Japan, right? Because that's not even, that's just kind of a no-go zone at the moment. And yet the United States sees Japan and South Korea as necessarily in lockstep with US security strategy for the region. And yet from South Korea's point of view, I fully understand the monumental challenges when you've got successive administrations in Tokyo that, while on the one hand recognize the strategic and economic value of relations between Japan and South Korea, make trashing South Korea their sport for their own domestic political fodder. So you're in a box, right? And you're cornered by being branded anti-everything while you're trying to run a country. And you're trying to run a country in the most volatile, I would still say this is the most volatile security area on the planet. And so how do you are a brilliant diplomat and teacher, scholar, practitioner. If you could, and maybe this is the only question you have to answer, what is your ideal vision for your preferred candidate to take forward for your nation? Thanks.
Wow, yeah, it's deep questions. That's all intertwined. Okay, I'll try. And thank you very much for your encouragement and a scholar practitioner. I'll use that word from now on. Okay, it's very interesting that, when I witnessed what was going on in your election 2020, and President Trump called progressive liberals Antifa, tactic fascism. To me, Korea and US biggest similarities, not really leftist group, it has a meaningful, it's not meaningful political group, not unlike Europe. So I don't think even, it's, struggle between liberal in the middle and the right, to me, actually. So just like that, because it's so divisive, and because of the absence of real leftist group. So that's why conservatives use this extreme frame that actually, I think I'm considering I am a liberal. Maybe at the most, it's a little toward left from but not far from the middle ground. But it's so effective, especially effective tool to criticize and frame. That's why President Moon is always being called communist. So I don't think he's really communist. Not even close to me. Actually, he's really, to me, is conservative. Anyway, and another reason is because I wrote a book. It's a historical book, but I wrote this 139 years of US-ROK relations when I was actually this year. And my thesis is we have to go back to pragmatism, even with the US. I was actually shocked that I saw conservatives, Gyeonggi, these conservative demonstrators are always having two flags, even though it's nothing to do with the US. And some National Assemblymen went to America in front of White House and just asked Trump to topple down President Moon. And actually, that was not really a small thing here. And this fake news, all those SNS messages, conspiracy theory. So those things, and even they raised their Israeli flags because somehow they think it's religiously they're connected to Israel. It's Korean Christian, some a very fundamental American Christianity. Here is much more conservative. So, but I try to be programmatic as possible. And let's say my actually main statement in my book is I said, Korean national interest much more important than alliance. It's so commonsensical, right? But some Koreans are uncomfortable with my statement. So that's why I call it sometimes gaslighting incident. So time to time, but the problem is how can you, is a vice ministerial, high official can say that in the book. So that was one of the frame that they started to, but at least the middle ground or my, actually I show up on the broadcasting a lot and commenting TV, television, and radio. So I was considered very balanced experts. So it's not really, I'm worried about it. Okay. And another thing is, okay, about the younger generation. I, time to time, somehow this what's happening to them actually, especially Lee Jae-myung and Moon Jae-in losing this generations. They are very loyal to liberals and progressive, used to be. So that's why, we try to mobilize them and bring to the voting. But somehow they were so disappointed by progressive hypocrisy, especially this Minister of Justice Jo incident. Just like that, what happened in Hillary. It's called cocktail left. Here is Gangnam left. The Gangnam left is like a pejoratively. So they're sick of it. But somehow, what I found through my experience or my feeling, because I meet my student in college, they're different species. I think. We kind of, have a liberal view on this issue and higher chance have a liberal view on the other issues, on gender issues or environmental protections. But I found this generation as multiple personality. It's a multiple ideological spectrum. So they have, especially young male here is very, very ultra conservative about the gender issue. They think they're a victim of Moon government's feminism. They're left behind. But some issues, for example, climate change issues, they're very progressive. So, but neither of the candidate has a really appeal for this 20-30 generation. This is a game changer. It's all neck and neck here. And 30, 40, 50, 30, 40, and 45 until 45, or 50. So actually supporter for Moon. But 60, 70, and above is supporting, Yoon. That's what's going on now. And the last, okay, the issue of unifications, yes, but including me, many progressive here, I think Moon and Lee Jae-myung, the unification is not a result, it's a process. So maybe peaceful coexist is part of the unification. And it's the same token that, as you said, this declaration of ending war can be a starting point too. But what he said is he tried to be pragmatic, but because he's kind of, why he said that? Because he's not going to appear progressive by saying that unrealistic goal. What he said, clearly said is, he said is, I'm not the man of giving them grandiose vision and then make people disappointed. He hate, he said. So he doesn't want to declare something. So in that context, he said is, I'm not going to say that we're going to reunify if I win the election. That kind of context he said. And about Japan, yes, he's a nationalist. Somehow in Korea, actually, conservative is, usually, nationalist. But here in Korea, it's interesting somehow, because conservative in Koreans are pro-American, pro-Japan comparatively. And you can see that in the campaign promise by Yoon, actually, he's, talking about, future good relation, improve the relation with Japan. And of course, Lee Jae-myung said that, but time to time, he said very, sharp or harsh words toward Japan. But think about that. And then actually, I talked to the minister in Japanese embassy in Korea. Think about, he's a populist, as you said. He's a nationalist, as you said. He could have done them more, maybe 110 times than now. Time to time, he's doing that. He's really trying not to do that. So that means consider, his inclination. And then actually, I advise him not to do that, because at least hide it. And actually, I stopped him visiting Dokdo Island. He finally stopped, and many people actually promote or advise him to go Dokdo Island. I said, no, don't be like, Lee Myung-bak at the end of his term. And actually, that's the starting point. That, bilateral relation got worse. Okay, finally, what vision? I'm really, I'm proud of my country. I'm proud of my people, Koreans, very competitive. And, we're kind of developed enough. And we are really have a lot of things, soft power and, all that. But somehow, what happened these days, it bothers me, is people are competitive, but people are not happy here in Korea. Japanese, Chinese, my feeling is, even though they're kind of acquiescence about their, politicians and politics, they are easily persuaded, or they don't care, or they're happy. I'm proud of my country is dynamic, and they are never compromised with dictatorship or authoritarianism. But somehow they're not happy. So competitive. It's so exhausting. And I'm, poor young people, poor my students. So I want my country and I want my people be happy. So just like Lee Jae-myung, I don't want to, give, declares, follow me or torching, I don't want to be like that. So, because it's Confucianism still, prevails. We like this normativeness or vision or a sublime goal, but I don't think it's easy. That's one of the points that I like. That's why I decided to help him. Thank you.
Thank you, Joon Hyung. I think we have around 5 minutes before we open it up for Q&A. So Mark and Alexis, if you have any quick follow-up questions, or if you want to poke Joon Hyung a little bit on specific topic, please go ahead.
I'll be really brief. Being happy is a wonderful goal. You actually sound a lot like Kim Gu, Pekbong Kim Gu. And just putting that one out there, that I've noticed that some people are having his writings be a suggested reading at the moment. So that's my only comment. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by the idea that that if you're on a political spectrum someplace, actually the issues are now unbundled. You can't assume that people think the same if they're classified as being in one part of the spectrum. Does that mean that you're becoming less polarized?
Okay, yeah, it's a good question. Actually, it definitely polarized, but somehow, you know, their basic idea or ideology is not that far apart, but somehow exaggerate into just far, you know, farther position. And then if they do that, it's very effective to attack the other side. So we are kind of, so that actually very interesting example is like this. Even though they're so different about North Korean policy in the election, but after election is over, I don't think it's that different between conservative leader and progressive leader. But somehow it is, I think it's look at you know, similarity and difference between Trump and Biden. It's not that far apart. It's the same here, I think.
Thank you. Let me open it up for Q&A. We have some questions about domestic issues and gender issues, but before we you know, touch upon that, let me take one question about North Korea. This is from Suyong Park. Lee Jae-myung seems to be pursuing a practical approach to North Korea policy, but what economic benefits do you think can we gain from supporting North Korea?
It's called peace economy. That's one word he want to use, and actually many people who are helping him, and actually, and Moon government, you know, like this word too, you know, peace economy, because we can have, it's just, the logic is simple. And if we have a peaceful coexist with North Korea, then Korea discount because of the threat from North Korea or tension on the Korean Peninsula, so we can have a better, you know, situation to economically get better. So, but you say that compare, you want me to compare with, then we have to kind of help North Korea, you know. And then actually I wanna, you know, tell you that I have an episode that I met, you know, this North Korean high official from North Korean MOFA, and in 2018 for 3 days in Helsinki. And he said, I asked, you know, in private talk, how painful the sanction is on you. And he actually had a deep breath and then thought about it and told me that, yeah, it's kind of getting at us, but we survived mid-90s, you know, this arduous campaign or arduous march, and more than 2 million died of hunger. And he said, even though under sanction, it's much better situation. But he said, if you push to us too much, and then we would not die alone. I think that's what they say. And there's a lot of things, and as you know, because this, you know, we had so many years of this tension and division, and you know, provocation by the North. We have a tendency to think this kind of tension or unpeaceful, not peaceful sounding as a default. I don't agree with it. And our company, our government sometimes consider that North Korean risk as a given default price, but I don't agree with that. And then actually, in this, we have a room to improve, and we can reduce Korea risk, North Korea risk. So in that sense, and then ultimately, if we reunify, in a much better situation. Okay, I'll stop here.
Thank you. We have two questions about gender issues. One is from Susie Anthony. How big of a role do you feel the candidate's stance on feminism will play in this election? And another question from Hu Chu-ping. Given how Yoon and his party vilified feminists, which is unfortunately extended to women in general, do you think this can be a determinant factor for the upcoming presidential election?
Okay, very similar question at the same. It's kind of because Moon is a really try to. Anyways, Moon is framed as a feminism. Moon's feminism means actually. What should I say? Ostracize the male, or giving this male actually, it's almost like discriminate male. So in that sense, you see Lee Jun-seok, opposition party leader, and Yoon Seok-youl tried to be more appealing to male, 20 and 30s male. So this feminism issue is actually their attacking point. So that means that, having said that, Lee Jae-myung is in kind of awkward situations. Of course, in his mind, he's a liberal, ideology. Is of course is and actually there is a very interesting episode I know between Lee Na-kyung and Lee Jae-myung had the same incident about the feminism. Lee Na-kyung understand. Okay, he said, because men is never grow up because they never have a baby. So he think he is on the side of the woman's side. He tried to be kind of try to appeal to women, but that's actually the woman actually angry about his comment. And Lee Jae-myung, whenever he said to his staff in the Gyeonggi or Sangnam City, he said, in official former surroundings, never classify or never, talk about this gender. We don't need to say gender difference. So that's actually he much advanced or much better concept of feminism too. So, but as I said, right now, there are many hatred against Moon's government about, because he's promoting feminism. So he says, I'm not sure because I'm not expert on this issue, but I heard that they're having a hard time because they cannot despise or dismiss the complaints from the male population.
Thank you. This is another issue about anti-discrimination, I guess. Charles Jones, what will be candidate Lee Jae-myung's attitude toward LGBTQ rights? Briefly.
Again, I'm a foreign policy advisor, but yeah, it is important. And we all, because of the big, like America, this Christian group, Christian coalition, is big supporter for opposition party, and they're against this LGBT a lot. And Jae-myung, of course, but we treated it as a protection of the minority, and in that group minority category that we put this LGBT. So in a way, kind of put it in as a big issue of minority. Don't discriminate minority, and this LGBT is in it, but it's not easy. Again, Lee Jae-myung is kind of have a high profile or bring this issue to the front, but definitely he's better perspective on these issues, more progressive perspective on these issues.
Thank you. I think this is more in your expertise. Question from Darcy Drought. As you mentioned, younger Koreans have a much different vision of politics and issues from the current political leaders, particularly the 386, 386. Given the differences in their attitudes toward issues like North Korea, social issues, and economic inequality, how do you assess the future of South Korean progressivism? Do you think the dividing lines will shift in any way, particularly on the North Korea issue, and how parties and politicians see the US-ROK relationship?
Okay, I think it's good questions. I think it's yes, because the survey this year, under 40% wants unification, especially less in younger generation. So maybe we are one nation or one people to be unified is no more appealing to them. And another reason is they're sick of North Korea. And they're sick and tired because whenever we progressive is talking about, it's framed sometimes, made by conservative, but it works, kind of working among these young people. So that's why I advise that why don't we have a kind of, this North Korean issue as well as alliance issue, kind of, because Korean foreign policy has been mesmerized by these two issues. And progressives, especially mesmerized or just black hole by North Korean issue. And on the other hand, conservatives just black hole by this alliance. So it's not really a good position to have some kind of a deal or a negotiation. So I'm asking him and I'm advising him that's why don't we just have some distance about this? Think it as a longer project, diversified foreign policy. That's why I talked about this third zone issues and new southern policy and things like that. And about change in the future, I don't know. We call it, younger. It's very popular term because it's, they're just putting everything in it, even the soul and spirit in one thing. It's called the young God, and this election can be, is a big, changing ties, kind of. So, conservatives, they think it's they're on the line, their life or their future is on the line. And progressive also is on the line. So I'm not sure, I don't know. Maybe if Yoon wins, if you have to think about that, majority party still, government party, this Minjudang, Democratic Party, for, after, if even Yoon wins, 2 years of his 5 years, usually most important critical years, actually he will not get support from National Assembly. That means there's a big obstacle. Okay, I'll stop here.
Thank you. Before we started, the panelists just briefly discussed whether we can, draw a clear line between domestic and foreign issues. And I just learned it's very blurry, as Mark warned me. And I think Joon Hyung did his best to demonstrate that big challenges. And thank you very much for your insights. And I'd like to thank all the distinguished speakers for joining us today, especially Joon Hyung for staying up late at night for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
For inviting me.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'd also like to thank our GWIKS team, Sean and Kim, for putting this together. And of course, thank you all for joining us. With that, let me conclude today's webinar. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you, everybody.
Healthy. Thank you very much. Bye.